The first thing I remember is the sound of the handcuff clicking shut around my wrist, sharp and small, almost polite, which somehow made it worse. My daughter was crying behind me, my son kept asking what I had done, and a police officer I had never met was standing so close I could smell the coffee on his breath while he told me to stop resisting, even though I had not moved a muscle. The strange part was, I had spent the better part of my adult life working for the federal government, walking into rooms full of people who actually had something to hide, and there I was, standing beside a hotel pool in flip-flops, being treated like I had broken in through a fence. My name is Daniel Cross, and at the time this happened, I had been a federal investigator for almost 16 years. I am not going to pretend that job makes me special. It does not, and it definitely did not make me immune to being judged by people who had already made up their minds before they heard my name. But it did teach me one thing. When a situation starts moving fast, you slow yourself down before somebody else decides your next move for you. That morning, I had promised myself I would not think about work, not even once. My wife Claire had been trying to get me to take a real vacation for years. Not the kind where I brought my laptop, answered emails at breakfast, and told everybody I was relaxing while I quietly watched my phone like it was a live grenade. She had finally worn me down after a brutal spring, and honestly, she had earned it. Claire was an attorney, one of those people who could walk into a meeting with a stack of documents under one arm and make 3 grown men forget what they were arguing about before she even sat down. She represented tenants, small business owners, people who got pushed around because they did not have money or connections or the right last name. And she had a way of carrying other people's problems home with her, even when she did not mean to. We had 2 kids, Mason, who was 12 and already at that age where he pretended he was too cool to be impressed by his parents, and Ellie, who was 8, still missing her front toes and still willing to hold your hand in public if she was tired enough. We had booked 4 days at a place called Shoreline Cove, a high-end resort about 3 hours south of Charleston, right on the water, with pale blue umbrellas around the pool, palm trees that looked like they had been arranged by somebody with a landscaping degree, and those clean white towels folded into neat little squares like they had never met a wet child in their lives. It was not the kind of place we usually stayed. Claire found a deal online, I used some points, and for the first time in a long time, we let ourselves act like we belonged somewhere that charged $20 for a fruit plate. The first afternoon was exactly what we needed. Mason was racing Ellie from one end of the shallow pool to the other, even though he let her win every time and then acted like he had slipped. Claire had a paperback open on her lap, though she had been on the same page for about 10 minutes because she kept looking up at the kids, and I was stretched out in a lounge chair with my sunglasses on, listening to the ocean somewhere beyond the fence. I remember thinking, this is it. This is what normal is supposed to feel like. No calls, no briefing rooms, no pressure in my chest, no one needing anything from me. Then I noticed the security guard watching us. He was standing near the towel station, maybe 30 yards away, wearing a navy polo shirt with Shoreline Cove embroidered over the chest. At first, I did not think much of it. Resorts have security, and security guards look at people. That is basically the job. But he kept looking. Not casually, not the way you scan a pool deck to make sure nobody is running or throwing glass bottles. He was looking directly at us, then toward the front desk, then back at us. Claire saw him too. She lowered her book and gave me that little look she had, the one that said she was not saying anything yet, but she had already noticed everything. A few minutes later, he started walking toward us. He was probably in his late 30s, broad-shouldered, clean haircut, name tag that said Trent. He stopped at the foot of my chair and smiled, but it was the kind of smile that never gets close to a person's eyes. "Excuse me, sir," he said. "Can I ask what room you are staying in?" I looked up at him over my sunglasses and said, "Sure, room 418. He nodded once, but he did not leave. He just stood there, holding a small radio in one hand. "Is there a problem?" I asked. "No problem at all," he said. "Just verifying guests." I looked around the pool area. There were at least 20 other people there. Couples, families, 2 guys in college football jerseys drinking beer before noon, a woman taking pictures of a breakfast like it was a museum exhibit. Nobody else was being asked where they were staying. Claire shut her book. She did not slam it shut. She was not there yet, but I knew the sound of that cover closing meant we had entered a different part of the day. "Is there a reason you are verifying us?" she asked. Trent shifted his weight. "It is standard procedure, ma'am." Claire nodded slowly. "Standard procedure for everyone?" she asked. Or just us? He gave a nervous little laugh, the kind people give when they know a question has landed too close to the truth. "I am just doing my job," he said. "I have heard that sentence a lot in my life. Sometimes it is true. Sometimes it is what people say when they do not want to admit they've stopped thinking for themselves." I decided to keep it simple. I said, "You have our room number. Call the front desk and confirm it." Trent said he would, then walked away. Mason came over, water dripping from his hair, and asked if he could get a smoothie from the snack bar. I handed him my key card and some cash, and he took Ellie with him, both of them arguing about whether mango was better than strawberry. Claire watched them go, then leaned closer to me. "You know what this is," she said quietly. I looked at the pool, at the people pretending not to watch us, at Trent talking into his radio near the gate. "Yeah," I said, "I know. The thing is, I had known this feeling since I was a kid. Not every day, not in every place, but enough times that your body learns it before your mind does. You walk into a store, and an employee suddenly appears in the next aisle. You sit in a restaurant and get seated near the bathroom, even though half the dining room is empty. You pull into a nice neighborhood, and somebody slows down just to look at your license plate. It is never one big thing at first. It is 100 little things, each one small enough that if you complain, somebody tells you that you are overreacting. That is the trick of it. It makes you question your own eyes." Trent came back with another guard, a younger guy with a buzz cut and a jaw that looked like he had spent his whole life trying to prove it was tough. His name tag said Cole. He did not smile at all. Trent cleared his throat and said, "Mr. Garble, Cross, we need you and your family to step away from the pool while we confirm your reservation." I stood up slowly. I am a big man, 6'2", and I have learned that when you are a black man over 6 feet tall, standing up in front of people who are already nervous around you can somehow be treated like an act of aggression. So I kept my hands where they could see them and said, "I gave you my room number. What exactly are you confirming?" Cole crossed his arms. "We have had issues with non-guests entering the property," he said. Claire stood up next to me. She was still holding her book, which made the whole thing almost absurd. "You were saying someone climbed over a fence, walked through a staffed resort, got past the front desk, changed into swim clothes, sat by the pool, and now you think that person is my husband," she said. Cole looked at her like he had not expected her to speak. "We are just following protocol, Ma." Claire tilted her head. "That word again," she said, hers cool. "It must be a very flexible protocol, because I have been sitting here for 40 minutes, and I have not seen you ask one other family for a room number." Trent tried to step in, maybe to calm things down, maybe because he was starting to understand that this was no longer going to be easy. He said, "Mom, please do not make this difficult." Claire looked at him and said, "Difficult for who?" That was the moment the air changed. You know how sometimes a room can go quiet without actually getting quiet. People keep talking, kids keep splashing, glasses still clink, but suddenly you can feel the attention turning toward you. That is what happened around that pool. I saw Mason and Ellie coming back from the snack bar. Mason had 2 smoothies in his hands. Ellie was holding a bag of chips against her chest, and both of them had stopped walking when they saw the guards standing over us. I did not want them afraid, so I smiled and waved them closer. "Come sit with Mom for a minute," I said. "It is nothing." But kids know when adults are lying to make them feel safe. Mason looked at me like he wanted to believe me, but he did not. Cole took one step closer. "Sir," he said, "we are asking you to leave the pool area until management clears this up." I said, "No." Not loudly, not angrily, just no. I told him they could call the front desk, they could walk to the front desk, they could bring the manager out if they wanted, but my family was not going anywhere until somebody explained why we were the only guests being treated like trespassers. Claire stood beside me close enough that I could feel her shoulder against mine. She was angry, I could tell, but she was also watching the kids. Every word she chose was measured for them. "We are not making a scene," she said. "You are making a scene," she said. "You are making a scene. And you are doing it in front of our children." Cole looked past us toward the front entrance. I followed his eyes and saw 2 uniformed police officers walking through the gate. They were moving fast, not running, but fast enough that every person around the pool knew something serious was about to happen. Mason whispered, "Dad, why are the cops coming?" I looked at him, then at Ellie, who had started to grip Claire's hand so tightly her knuckles were white. I wanted to tell them it was a mistake. I wanted to tell them the officers would take one look at our reservation, apologize, and leave. I wanted to tell them grown-ups always did the right thing when they had the facts in front of them. But the truth was, I'd spent too many years in law enforcement to believe that every badge came with good judgment. So I put my hand on Mason's shoulder, looked him in the eye and said, "Stay right by your mum. No matter what happens, you stay right by her." Then the taller officer stopped in front of me, looked me up and down like he had already read the report in his head and said, "Sir, we got a call about a disturbance. I need to see some identification." And before I could even reach for my wallet, I heard Cole behind him say, "That is the one." The taller officer did not look back at Cole when he said it, but I heard the little bit of confidence in his voice, the kind that shows up when somebody thinks a badge has just arrived to finish an argument for them. The officer in front of me had a nameplate that read Pite. That hit, and his partner, younger man with a square face and a tired expression, stood half a step behind him with one hand resting near his belt. Pike looked at me again, then at Claire, then at the kids, and for a second I thought maybe he was going to do what a reasonable person would do, ask the front desk to confirm our room, take 30 seconds to get the facts, and end the whole thing before it became something our children remembered for the rest of their lives. Instead he said, "What exactly is going on here?" Cole was quick to answer. "They will not leave the pool area while we verify whether they are guests," he said. I stared at him. That was not what happened, and he knew it. I had not refused to cooperate. I had given them the room number. I had told them to call the desk. I had asked why they were only questioning us. But once the story passed from one person to another, it had already started getting kinged up, trimmed down, made easier to explain. We had gone from a family sitting by a pool to people who would not comply. That is how these things happen. Nobody has to say the ugliest part out loud. They just build a version of the story where you are automatically the problem. I kept my voice low and said, "Officer, we are guests here. We are staying in room 418. Security came over, asked us for our room number, and instead of checking it, they told us to leave the pool. My wife asked why nobody else was being questioned, and now somehow we are standing here with police officers." Pike looked at Claire. "Is that true, Mum?" Claire did not blink. "It is true," she said, "and I would like you to ask them why they called you before they called the front desk." Pike glanced at Trent, and Trent looked down for a second, then back up. "We had concerns," he said. Pike nodded slowly, like that answer was enough for him. "Concerns about what?" I asked. Trent did not answer. Cole answered for him. "We have had people come onto the property before." I said, "That is not an answer. What did we do that made you think we were not supposed to be here?" Cole looked at Pike, probably expecting him to shut me down. Pike stepped closer, not enough to touch me, but close enough that I could see the veins at his temple. "Sir," he said, "I am going to need you to calm down." I almost laughed, not because anything was funny, but because I had not raised my voice once. I had stood still, kept my hands visible, answered every question, and now I was being told to calm down because I had asked for an explanation. Claire heard it too. "He is calm," she said. "You are standing in front of a man who has done nothing wrong, and you are talking to him like he is a threat." Pike turned his attention to her. "Mum, I am trying to get control of the situation." Claire looked around at the pool deck, at the families watching, at the security guards who had started this, and then back at him. "No," she said, "you are trying to make it easier for them to be right." There was a pause after that, the kind of pause where everyone nearby pretends they are looking at something else, but nobody actually is. I saw an older woman near the cabanas lift her phone a little higher. I saw the bartender stop drying a glass. I saw Mason standing beside Claire with both hands wrapped around his smoothie, the cup slowly dripping down his wrist because he had forgotten to drink it. Ellie was pressed against Claire's leg now, half hidden behind her, and I knew I had to get this under control before her fear became bigger than the moment itself. I reached into my back pocket slowly. Pike's partner moved immediately. "Keep your hands where I can see them," he said. I stopped. "I am getting my wallet," I said. Pike nodded once. "Do it slowly." I pulled out my wallet, opened it carefully, and took out my federal identification. I held it between two fingers and said, "My name is Daniel Cross. I am a federal investigator. This is my badge and identification. I am not saying that because I think I deserve better treatment than anyone else. I am saying it because it should make it very clear that I understand procedure. I understand lawful orders, and I understand exactly how far this has already gone." Pike took the badge from my hand. He looked at it for maybe 3 seconds, then turned it over as if he expected something to fall out of it. His partner leaned in to look. Cole stood behind them with his arms crossed. For one brief moment I thought the situation might change. I thought Pike would ask somebody to call the desk, verify the room, give a stiff apology, and get his officers out of there before the resort ended up with a public relations disaster. But Pike handed the badge back to me with 2 fingers and said, "That does not tell me whether you are authorized to be on this property." Claire let out a short breath through her nose. It was not a laugh exactly, but it was close. "You have got to be kidding me," she said. Pike looked at her. "Mum, I need you to step back." "No," Claire said. "You need to answer the question. You have a federal ID in your hand, a room number, 2 children standing here in swim clothes, and a staff member who could clear this up with 1 phone call. Why are you still acting like he is trespassing?" Pike's jaw tightened. "Because I do not take orders from civilians," he said. That line told me almost everything I needed to know about him. It was not about the resort anymore. It was not about the room. It was not even about me. It was about the fact that Claire had made him feel embarrassed in front of other people, and men like that do not always respond to embarrassment by getting smaller. Sometimes they try to make the room smaller around everyone else. I saw it in interviews all the time. People who had been challenged, corrected, questioned, and suddenly needed to prove that they were still the one in control. I looked at him and said, "Nobody is ordering you around. We are asking you to verify the facts." Pike stepped in closer. "Sir," I said, "calm down." And there it was again, louder this time, said for the benefit of the crowd. A warning disguised as advice. I looked past him toward the front lobby. The entrance was not far, maybe 100 feet. I could see the concierge desk through the glass, 2 employees behind it, and a manager standing near the elevator with a clipboard in his hand. I pointed in that direction. "My reservation is inside that building," I said. "My name is on it. My credit card is on it. My family has been here since yesterday. You can walk in there and confirm it in 30 seconds. Pike looked at my hand, then at me. "Do not point at me," he said. I lowered my hand. I was pointing at the lobby. "You are making this harder than it has to be," he said. Claire finally stepped forward. "No," she said, "you are making it dangerous. My children are standing here watching you create a problem that does not exist." The younger officer, the one standing behind Pike, looked uncomfortable for the first time. His nameplate said, "Ol." He was younger than Pike by maybe 10 years, and he had the look of somebody who had entered a situation expecting a routine call and now wanted very badly to be somewhere else. He leaned toward Pike and said something quietly. Pike shook his head. Then Trent, the first security guard, spoke again. "Officer," he said, "we just want them off the pool deck until we confirm the reservation." I looked at him and said, "You mean until you confirm whether you should have called the police on a family that paid to stay here?" Trent swallowed. Cole muttered something under his breath. I caught only part of it. Something about attitude. That word has a strange way of following people around. It can mean confidence. It can mean frustration. It can mean you are not smiling while someone treats you badly. Most of the time, it means you are not being as easy to control as somebody hoped you would be. Pike heard Cole too, and instead of correcting him, he looked at me like I had just confirmed a suspicion. "All right," he said, "here is what is going to happen. You are going to leave the pool area with your family, and you can work this out with the resort manager in the lobby." I said, "Fine, we will go to the lobby. But I want you to note that we are leaving because we are choosing to protect our children, not because we did anything wrong." Pike gave me a thin smile. "You can tell whoever you want, whatever you want." Claire looked at me. I knew what she was thinking. Take the kids inside. Get them away from this. Do not give them the scene Pike clearly wanted. So I turned toward Mason and Ellie and said, "Grab your things," Pike clearly wanted. So I turned toward Mason and Ellie and said, "Grab your things. We're going to talk to the manager." Mason moved first, but Ellie did not. She was still holding Claire's hand, and her eyes were wet now. "Dad," she said, "are we in trouble?" I knelt down in front of her. "Not even a little bit," I said. "You did nothing wrong." Mom and I did nothing wrong. Sometimes grown-ups make bad choices, and when they do, we deal with it. She nodded, but she was trying hard not to cry. I brushed a wet curl out of her face and stood back up. That should have been the end of it. We should have walked through the lobby, shown the manager our room key, watched the color drain from Trent's face, and gone upstairs to pack our bags. But as I turned to pick up my shirt from the lounge chair, Pike said, "Hold on." I stopped. He was looking at my wallet. "I need to see your driver's license." I handed it to him. He studied it longer than he had studied the federal ID. He checked the name, looked at me, looked back at the photo, then held it out toward Hollis. Hollis took it and glanced over it. Pike said, "This address is out of state." "Yes," I said. "We are on vacation." He looked at the resort building, then back at me. "You say you are in room 48, I said, "Yes." Pike looked at Trent. "Have you confirmed that?" Trent hesitated. "Not yet, officer." Pike nodded slowly like that was somehow my fault. Then he looked at me and said, "Why have you not confirmed it yourself?" I stared at him. "Because I'm not the employee who accused my family of sneaking into the property." Claire stepped in again. "This is unbelievable," she said. "The resort is right there. Call the desk." Pike's eyes stayed on me. "Sir, I asked you a question," I said, "and I answered it." His face changed. It was subtle, but I saw it. The polite mask did not disappear all at once. It just loosened around the edges. He moved his hand toward the cuffs on his belt. I did not see a weapon. I did not see a threat. I saw a man getting ready to punish somebody because he did not like being spoken to as an equal. Mason saw it too. "Dad," he said, his voice suddenly small. Claire put one arm around both kids and pulled them closer. Pike said, "Turn around." I did not move. "What?" I said. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back." The whole pool deck went still. Even the water seemed quieter. I looked at him and said, "Am I being detained?" Pike said, "You were being investigated for trespassing and disorderly conduct." I almost could not believe it. Disorderly conduct. I almost could not believe it. Disorderly conduct. That was the phrase. Not because I had yelled, not because I had threatened anyone, not because I had refused to identify myself. I was disorderly because I had not quietly accepted the story they were trying to tell about me. Claire stepped directly between us. "No," she said. "Absolutely not. What is the probable cause?" Pike stared at her. "Move aside." "What is the probable cause?" she repeated. "You have no complaint, no victim, no evidence of trespassing, and no basis for disorderly conduct. You are trying to arrest him because he embarrassed you." Pike's hand hovered near the cuffs. "Mom, move aside before I detain you too." Claire took another step forward. It was not dramatic. She did not wave her hands or scream. She simply planted her feet and looked at him with the kind of calm that can make a person feel more exposed than shouting ever could. "Try it," she said. I saw Hollis look away. I saw the older woman near the cabanas whisper something to the man beside her. I saw a teenage boy holding his phone straight out now, not even pretending he was not recording. Pike looked around and realized people were watching, but instead of backing down, it seemed to make him more determined. He pointed at me. "Turn around now." I had been in enough tense situations to know that there are moments when being right is not the same thing as being safe. I wanted to argue. Every part of me wanted to stand there and make him say out loud what he thought I had done. But Ellie was crying now, not loudly, just shaking against Claire's side, and Mason had gone pale. I could not let my pride turn into a risk for them. So I looked at Claire. She shook her head once barely. "Daniel," she whispered. "I know," I said. Then I turned around. My hands were not shaking when I put them behind my back, but I could feel my heart pounding all the way into my fingers. I heard Pike take the cuffs from his belt. I heard the tiny metal chain shift, and then I heard Mason say, "Dad, please do not let them take you." That was the part that almost broke me. Not the cuffs, not the crowd, not the humiliation. It was my son's voice trying to sound brave and failing. I turned my head just enough to see him. He was standing beside his mother, jaw tight, trying not to cry because he was 12 and 12-year-old boys think crying means they have lost something. I said, "Mason, look at me." He did. I said, "You stay with your mom. You hear me. I am right here." Pike grabbed my wrist. It was harder than it needed to be. The cuff snapped shut, then the other one. The metal was cold against my skin, and for a second I had this strange memory of every person I had ever interviewed who told me. I did not know what to do, so I froze. I understood it then, in a way I never had before. There is a kind of fear that makes the world narrow. You can see the sun, hear voices, smell chlorine, feel heat on the back of your neck, but all your mind can focus on is the sound of your child crying behind you. Claire was talking now, fast and clear. "Officer Pike, I need your badge number. I need the name of every officer on scene. I need the name of every security employee involved. I need you to understand that this entire interaction is being recorded, and I will obtain every piece of footage from this property, including surveillance cameras, guest recordings, dispatch logs, body cameras, and internal communications. Pike said, "You can ask for whatever you want when we get to the station." Claire laughed then, a real laugh this time, but it was cold enough to make even Pike blink. "You think you are taking him to a station," she said. "You are not even going to make it to the parking lot before your department starts getting calls." Pike looked at her with open irritation. "Is that a threat?" "No," Claire said. "That is a promise from a lawyer who knows exactly what she is looking at." Cole, who had been standing behind the officers like he had suddenly become invisible, stepped forward and said, "He was being aggressive from the beginning." I turned my head as much as I could and looked at him. "Aggressive," I said. "You asked me for a room number. I gave it to you." "You asked me for a room number. I gave it to you." "You asked me to leave." I said, "Call the desk." "You called the police because you did not like the answer." "That is not aggressive. That is inconvenient for you." Pike yanked my arm slightly. "Do not talk to the staff." Claire stepped forward again. "Do not touch him like that," she said. Pike looked at her, and for a second I thought he might actually try to cuff her too. Then something changed. It started with a voice from behind the pool chairs. A woman said, "Officer, I have the whole thing on video." Pike turned. The older woman near the cabanas had stepped forward now. She was maybe in her 60s, grey hair pulled back, sun hat in one hand, phone in the other. Her husband stood beside her looking nervous, but she did not look nervous at all. She said, "I was sitting right there when the security guard first came over. Your man did not threaten anyone. He did not raise his voice. Those guards singled them out, and everybody here saw it." Pike said, "Mom, please step back." She held up her phone. "No," she said, "I have been told to step back by enough men in my life. You are not going to scare me because you do not like that people saw what happened." Another voice joined hers. A young guy near the bar said, "I got it too." Then a woman by the pool step said, "Me too." Suddenly there were phones everywhere. Not one or two, at least a dozen. People who'd been quiet 10 minutes earlier were now finding their voices, maybe because they had been waiting for somebody else to speak first. Maybe because seeing a child cry while her father stood in cuffs had pushed them past whatever social rule usually tells people to mind their own business. Hollis looked at Pike. "We should verify the room," he said quietly. Pike ignored him. Claire heard it, though. "Verify the room," she repeated. "There it is. That is all we asked for. So why is my husband in handcuffs?" Pike said nothing. He stared at the crowd, then at me, then at Claire. And that was when a man in a linen jacket came hurrying through the lobby doors with a hotel key card in one hand and a look of panic on his face. I recognized him from the front desk. He was the resort manager, a guy named Russell Vane, probably early 50s, expensive watch, expensive shoes, expensive look of somebody who had spent most of his career trying to keep bad news from reaching the people above him. He stopped when he saw me in cuffs. His face went blank, then pale, then blank again. "Mr. Cross," he said, "what is going on?" Claire turned toward him so quickly he took a step back. "You tell us," she said. "You called the police on your paying guests." Russell looked at Trent. Trent looked at the ground. Russell looked at Pike, then back at us. "There must be some kind of misunderstanding," he said. Claire's voice was very quiet now, which was always when she was most dangerous. "No," she said, "there was a choice. Several choices, actually. Your staff chose to question us. They chose to escalate. They chose to call police before checking a reservation, and now my husband is handcuffed in front of our children. So do not insult us by calling it a misunderstanding." Russell looked at me, then at the cuffs, and I could see the math happening behind his eyes. He was thinking about lawsuits, ratings, headlines, corporate officers, insurance carriers, angry investors, all the things that had nothing to do with the fear on Ellie's face. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a printed reservation slip. "Mr. Cross is a registered guest," he said. "Room 418. He checked in yesterday afternoon." Pike did not react right away. He just stood there with his hand still resting against my arm. Russell continued, his voice shaking now. "There must have been an error in communication." Claire looked at him. "An error in communication," she said. "That is what you call it when your staff sees a black family at a resort and decides they need police to determine whether they belong there." Pike finally let go of my arm. Hollis took one step forward and said, "Officer, we need to remove the cuffs." Pike looked at him. I said we are still investigating. Investigating what? I asked. The whole crowd heard me. I did not shout. I did not need to. Investigating what exactly? You have confirmation from the resort. You have my identification. You have witnesses. What crime are you still trying to find? Pike's face turned red. He leaned close to me and said, "You do not get to tell me how to do my job." I looked straight ahead and said, "No, but I can tell you when you were doing it wrong." That was the moment he lost whatever little control he had left. He grabbed the cuff chain and pulled me toward the edge of the pool deck. Claire shouted my name. Mason moved forward, but Claire caught him around the shoulders. Hollis stepped between us. "Pike, stop," he said. The words came out harder than before. I said stop. Pike froze. For a second, everything froze with him. Hollis looked at me, then at the cuffs, then at the crowd of phones. His voice was low, but everyone could hear it. "There is no reason to keep him restrained." Pike said, "He has been uncooperative." Hollis looked him directly in the eye. "No, he has not." That was the first time anybody wearing a uniform had said it out loud. "No, he has not." You could almost feel the crowd breathe. Pike looked around again, and this time he saw what was really happening. The resort manager had confirmed our room. His partner had contradicted him. The guests had footage. Claire was already typing something into her phone with one hand while holding Ellie close with the other. And the story he tried to control was no longer his story. It belonged to everybody watching. He reached for the key. The cuff opened around my left wrist first, then my right. I rubbed the red marks slowly, not because they hurt that badly, but because I needed a second to remind myself where I was. Claire came straight to me. She did not say anything at first. She just held my face between both hands and looked at me. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. Then she turned around and faced Pike, Trent, Cole, Russell, all of them standing there in different uniforms but connected by the same ugly decision. "My kids are going upstairs," she said. "My husband is going upstairs. And then I am going to make some calls. You are all going to stay exactly where you are until I am done telling people what happened here." Russell tried to speak. "Mrs. Cross, we would like to offer you a full refund and complimentary accommodations." Claire looked at him with a kind of disbelief that almost made me feel sorry for him. "You think a free room is the answer," she said. "My daughter just watched her father get handcuffed because your staff could not be bothered to make a phone call. Keep your complimentary accommodations. What we need is every security report, every camera angle, every employee statement, every dispatch recording, and every name connected to this decision." Russell opened his mouth, then closed it again. Pike started to say something about procedure, but Claire raised one hand. "Do not say procedure to me," she said. "Not today. Not after you used that word as a shield for every bad decision you made." I watched Pike's expression harden, and I knew he was still not finished. Men like him do not suddenly become sorry because they get caught. They become careful. There is a difference. He reached for his radio and turned away from us. Hollis stood nearby, staring at the ground. Cole and Trent looked like they wanted to disappear into the concrete. Mason had not said a word since the cuffs came off. He was holding Ellie's hand now, and Ellie was looking at the red marks on my wrists like there was something she could not understand. I crouched down in front of them. "Mason," I said, "look at me." He did, but his eyes were angry, not the loud kind of angry, the quiet kind that scares you because it is too old for a kid's face. "Why did they do that?" he asked. I took a breath. I wanted to give him a clean answer, something simple, something a father could say that would make the world feel solid again. But I could not lie to him. "Sometimes people see what they expect to see," I said, "and sometimes when they are wrong, instead of admitting it, they try to make you pay for their mistake." Mason looked toward Pike. "So they just get to do that?" "Not this time," Claire said from behind me. Her voice was calm, but there was steel in it now. "Not this time." I stood up and looked across the pool deck at the officers, the resort staff, the witnesses, the phone still raised in the air. I had spent years believing that justice was something you found by following evidence, asking questions, staying patient, doing the work. But standing there with marks on my wrists and my children trembling beside me, I realized something else. Justice does not begin in a courtroom. It begins the moment somebody refuses to let a lie become the official version of what happened. I looked at Pike one more time. He was speaking into his radio, his voice low and urgent. Then he stopped, listened for a few seconds, and his eyes moved slowly toward me. Whatever he heard on the other end changed his face. He looked less angry now, less certain. And for the first time since he arrived, he looked scared. Whatever he heard on the other end changed his face. It was not panic exactly, not at first, but something close to it. The kind of look a person gets when they suddenly realize the room they thought they controlled has gotten bigger than them. Pike lowered the radio slowly and looked at Hollis, then at the resort manager, then at the crowd of people still holding their phones up like little glass windows into the worst 10 minutes of our vacation. He cleared his throat and said, "Everybody needs to remain where they are." Claire looked at him and gave a tired little smile that had no warmth in it. "That is funny," she said. "5 minutes ago you wanted us gone. Now you need us to stay." Pike ignored her. With the color in his face told me he heard every word. Hollis stepped close to him and said, "What did dispatch say?" Pike kept his eyes forward. "Captain Devereaux is on the way." Hollis looked at him. "Why?" Pike hesitated, and that pause answered the question before he did. "Because dispatch verified Mr. Misch. Cross's federal credentials," Pike said finally, "and because someone from the resort called the department command line." Claire folded her arms. "Someone from the resort," she said. "That would be the same resort that could have avoided this whole thing by calling the front desk before calling the police." Russell Vane, the manager, looked like he had aged 10 years in the last 2 minutes. His linen jacket was starting to stick to his shirt, his expensive watch kept flashing in the sun every time he moved his hands, and he had the helpless expression of a man who was used to problems being handled quietly by people beneath him. He kept saying the same thing over and over, almost like he thought repetition might turn it into the truth. "There was a breakdown in communication," he said. "A breakdown in communication." Claire looked at him for a long second, then said, "Mr. Vane, when a printer jams, that is a breakdown in communication. When your security team profiles a family, calls police before checking their reservation, and stands there while an officer puts cuffs on an innocent man in front of 2 children, that is not a breakdown. That is a decision." Russell opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I could see Mason watching all of it. He was standing close enough to me that his shoulder brushed my side every few seconds, not because he was scared exactly, though he was, but because he needed to make sure I was still there. Ellie had both arms around Claire's waist, her face pressed into her mother's cover-up, and every time somebody raised their voice she flinched a little. I wanted to take them upstairs, get them away from the phones and uniforms and everybody's guilty faces. But I also knew that if we walked away too soon, the people who had just tried to make us disappear from the pool deck would get another chance to tell the story without us in it. So I stayed. I stood there with the red marks from the cuffs still burning across my wrists, and I waited. Captain Devereaux arrived about 12 minutes later, though it felt longer. She came through the lobby doors wearing a dark department uniform, no sunglasses, no dramatic entrance, just a woman in her late 50s with silver at her temples and the kind of posture that made everybody else unconsciously straighten up. Behind her was another officer carrying a tablet and a small evidence bag, and right away I knew this was no longer a routine call. She did not walk toward me first. She walked straight to Pike. "Officer Pike," she said, eyes on me. Pike faced her. "Captain, I asked for your body camera, your radio log, your written report, and the names of every officer and employee involved before I got out of my car," she said. "You have not written a report yet, have you?" Pike said, "No, Captain." She nodded once. "Good. That means we might still get the truth before it gets cleaned up." Nobody said a word after that. She turned to Hollis. "Officer Hollis, did Mr. Cross threaten anyone?" Hollis looked at Pike for half a second, then back at the captain. "No, ma'am," he said. "Did he refuse to identify himself?" "No, ma'am," he said. "Did he refuse to identify himself?" "No, ma'am." "Did he resist detention?" "No, ma'am." Captain Devereaux nodded again, slow and controlled. "Then why was he handcuffed?" Pike finally spoke. The subject was increasingly agitated, Captain, and I believe there was a risk of escalation. Captain Devereaux turned toward him. "Agitated," she said. "That is your legal basis." Pike tried again. He was challenging officers, refusing to leave the area and creating a disturbance. I heard Claire make a small sound behind me, almost like a laugh, but she did not interrupt. She did not have to. She did not have to. Captain Devereux looked toward the crowd. A few people were still filming. The older woman from the cabanas was standing near the towel station with her husband, phone in hand, sun hat tucked under one arm. The captain pointed gently toward her. "Mom, were you here when this began?" The woman stepped forward. "I was," she said. "My name is Patricia Bell. I was sitting right there." The man never raised his voice. His wife did, once or twice, but only after those guards kept pushing them. The officer cuffed him because he did not like being questioned. Captain Devereux looked at Pike again. Pike stared at the ground for the first time since I had met him. Then the young man near the bar, the one who had said he recorded everything, raised his phone and said, "I have the whole thing from when security walked over. You can hear them asking for the room number. You can hear him give it. You can hear the security guard tell the officers he was refusing to cooperate, even though he was standing there doing exactly what they asked." Captain Devereux motioned to the officer with the tablet. "Get every video," she said. "Ask for original files, not social media clips. Preserve timestamps." Then she looked at Russell. "Mr. Vane, I need every camera angle around this pool, the front desk, the main entrance, and the security office. Do not edit anything. Do not delete anything. Do not call your corporate office and ask what you should do. You are going to preserve everything exactly as it exists right now." Russell swallowed hard. "Of course, Captain." She gave him a look that said she did not believe him. "And I need the security call logs, staff schedules, radio traffic, guest complaints from the last 30 days, and any written instructions given to your security staff about who they should be watching." Russell blinked. "Written instructions." Captain Devereux did not move. "Yes," she said. "Written instructions. Now." That was the first time I saw real fear in Trent's face. He had been standing off to the side with Cole, both of them quiet, both of them trying to look like they were just minor characters in someone else's mess. But when the captain mentioned written instructions, Trent looked at Russell, and Russell looked at him, and something passed between them. It was quick, but it was there. Claire saw it too. She leaned toward me and whispered, "There it is." I said nothing. I had spent too many years reading rooms not to recognize that moment. Somebody had given somebody permission, not necessarily in plain words, not necessarily with an order that said target black families, because people who want to keep their hands clean rarely write down the ugliest part, but permission had been given. A culture had been created. A signal had been sent. Captain Devereux noticed the look too. She turned to Trent. "Mr. Maddox, did management instruct you to contact law enforcement before verifying guest information?" Trent shook his head too quickly. "No, ma'am. Did management instruct you to monitor guests who did not appear to belong on the property?" He froze. Cole shifted beside him. Russell stepped forward. "Captain, I think there may be some misunderstanding about our guest safety policy." Claire turned toward him. "There is that word again," she said. "Misunderstanding." Russell ignored her, which was probably the first smart thing he had done all afternoon. He looked at the captain and said, "We had an incident last month involving several teenagers who came onto the property from the public beach. They used the pool, took food from the snack bar, caused some damage in the locker area. Ownership was concerned. We asked security to be more proactive." Captain Devereux said, "Define proactive," said, "Define proactive." Russell hesitated. "We told them to verify guests when something did not look right. There it was, not loud, not dramatic, just a phrase floating in the hot air beside a pool, when something did not look right." Claire closed her eyes for 1 second, then opened them again. "And who decides what does not look right?" she asked. Russell did not answer. Cole did not answer. Cole did. "He did not mean to, I do not think. Maybe the pressure had gotten to him. Maybe he was tired of standing there with the truth chewing through the silence. Or maybe he simply did not have the sense to know when to keep his mouth shut." He said, "We see people all the time who are obviously guests." Claire looked at him. "Obviously," she repeated. Cole folded his arms. "You know what I mean." "No," she said. "Say what you mean." Cole looked toward Pike, but Pike was not looking at him now. Nobody was going to save him. He swallowed and said, "I mean, some people fit the place, and some people do not." The pool deck went quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. Before, people had been watching because they were unsure what was happening. Now they knew. Nobody needed him to say another word. Trent closed his eyes briefly. Russell looked like he might actually be sick. Captain Devereux stared at Cole for a long moment, then said, "Thank you for being clear. It saves everyone time." Cole started to backtrack. "That is not what I meant." Captain Devereux held up one hand. "Do not fix it now," she said. "You had plenty of time to think before you said it. Let the recording keep what you said." That was the moment everything changed for real. Not when the cuffs came off. Not when Pike got the call. Not even when the manager confirmed our room. It changed when the excuse stopped sounding like a policy and started sounding like what it had always been, a judgment about who belonged and who did not. I looked at Mason. He was staring at Cole with a look I had hoped he would not have to learn for another 10 years. It was not confusion anymore. It was understanding, and I hated that for him. He looked up at me and whispered, "They thought we did not belong here." I put my hand on the back of his neck and said, "They were wrong." That is all I could say in that moment. They were wrong. Captain Devereux asked Russell to take her into the security office. Before he left, Russell tried one more time to speak to us. "Mr. and Mrs. Cross, I want you to know Shoreline Cove does not tolerate discrimination." Claire looked at the two guards, the officer, the hotel staff, the crowd, and then back at him. "You may not tolerate it in your brochure," she said, "but it has been living comfortably in your building." Russell lowered his eyes. I almost felt bad for him then, almost. But then I looked at Ellie, still pressed into Claire's side, and the feeling passed. Captain Devereux assigned the officer with a tablet to take statements from witnesses. Hollis remained near us, awkward and quiet. Pike stood 20 feet away, hands on his hips, staring at the water. It was strange to see him like that. 20 minutes earlier, he had been the loudest person in the space without ever raising his voice. He had used posture, tone, a hand near his belt, the weight of his uniform, all the things some people use when they want you to know they have power over you. Now he looked smaller. Not harmless, not innocent, just smaller. I walked over to him before Claire could stop me. I did not get too close. I did not want another excuse. I just stood there and said, "Why?" He looked at me. "I did not expect you to understand," he said. I said, "Try me." He looked away toward the ocean. "I was responding to a call," he said. "Security said you were refusing to leave. I said you had my ID in your hand. You had my room number. You had two kids standing beside me. You heard my room number. You had two kids standing beside me. You heard my wife asking for a phone call to the front desk. At what point did you decide I was the problem?" Pike's face tightened. "You kept challenging me. There it was. Not trespassing, not disorderly conduct, not danger. I had challenged him. I had refused to become small enough to make him comfortable. I looked at him and said, 'You know what is funny? I have interviewed men who lied to my face after they hurt people, and every one of them had a reason ready. They were scared. They were tired. They were under pressure. They felt disrespected. But none of those reasons changed what they did.'" Pike looked at me then, really looked at me, and I could see anger rising in him again. "You think you are better than me because of that badge?" I looked down at the red marks on my wrists. "No," I said. "I think that badge should have reminded you that you are not above the law." And that seemed to hit him harder than anything else had. He did not answer. He just looked away again. A few minutes later, Captain Devereux came back from the security office holding a printed email in one hand. She walked straight to Russell and asked, "Is this your signature?" Russell took the paper and went pale. It was an internal memo sent 3 weeks earlier to the security team. It talked about protecting the resort experience, preventing unauthorized access, and making sure the property maintained a certain standard during the busy summer season. Most of it was vague, corporate language, the kind of thing people write when they want to sound professional without saying what they really mean. But one line sat there in plain black letters, ugly in its simplicity. Use judgment when identifying individuals who may not fit the expected guest profile. Claire read us over the captain's shoulder and let out a breath. "Expected guest profile," she said. "That is a nice way of saying people who look like us make some of your guests uncomfortable." Russell started talking fast. That is not what it meant. It was about behavior, attire, guest access, all kinds of factors. Captain Devereux looked at him. "Then why did your security team not ask the man in the college jersey by the bar for his room number? Why did they not question the two white teenagers who had been running through the cabanas all afternoon?" Why did they not approach the man who entered through the beach gate without a wristband 20 minutes before this family arrived? Russell had no answer. The captain continued, "Your own cameras show that he walked in from the public side. Your staff saw him. They did nothing. But they saw this family sitting quietly at the pool, and suddenly your policy became urgent. Do you understand why that is a problem?" Russell whispered, "Yes." I do not think he understood completely. I think he understood that his job might be in danger. There is a difference, but at least he had stopped pretending there was no problem. The rest of the afternoon became a blur of statements, names, recordings, children getting hungry because nobody had eaten lunch, and Claire making phone calls with a voice that got calmer the angrier she became. She called her law partner, a woman named Denise Hall, and by the end of the call, Denise had already contacted a civil rights attorney in the city and asked a litigation team to begin preserving evidence. Claire asked the resort for a private room where the kids could sit away from the pool deck. Russell offered us an upgraded suite. Claire looked at him like he had offered her a coupon for free parking. "We do not need a better room," she said. "We need a written preservation order in the name of your corporate counsel." He nodded so fast I thought his neck might snap. Eventually, Captain Devereaux came over and told us Officer Pike had been relieved of duty pending an internal investigation. Cole and Trent were being separated for statements. The department would also be reviewing the dispatch call body camera footage and whether Pike had accurately described the situation to anyone over the radio. I asked her one question. "Is he going to write that I resisted?" She looked me in the eye. "Not if I have anything to say about it," she said. I appreciated that. I did, but I had been in government long enough to know the difference between a person trying to do right and a system built to protect itself. So I asked her another question. "Will you make the body camera footage public?" She paused. "That depends on the investigation." Claire stepped beside me. "Then we will make every other video public," she said. The captain nodded slowly. "I expected that," she said. By the time we got back to our room, it was almost evening. The ocean outside our balcony was beautiful in the way it had been that morning, wide and blue and indifferent to what people did near it. Ellie sat on the bed in one of those oversized hotel robes, eating crackers from a room service tray because she refused to go downstairs. Mason stood out on the balcony with me, leaning against the railing, quiet for a long time. I did not force him to talk. When kids get scared, adults sometimes rush in with speeches because silence makes us uncomfortable. But silence has its place. After a while, he asked, "Dad, are you going to get those guys fired?" I looked at him. I said, "I do not know." He looked disappointed. I said that is not the only thing that matters. What matters is that they cannot pretend this did not happen. What matters is that people see it, and the next time somebody thinks they could do this to another family, they remember there are consequences. Mason was still looking out at the water. He said, "What if nobody had been filming?" That question stayed with me. It still does. What if nobody had been filming? What would Pike's report have said? What would the resort have said? Would it have been an aggressive man refusing lawful orders? Would it have been a simple misunderstanding? Would the truth have become whatever version was easiest for people in power to live with? I told Mason. Then we would still tell the truth. But even as I said it, I knew how many people had told the truth before and never been believed. That is the part nobody likes to sit with. We left Shoreline Cove the next morning. Russell offered to cover the entire stay, our travel costs, anything we needed. Claire told him to send all communication through council. He tried to apologize one last time in the lobby. This time, he sounded more human. "Mr. Cross," he said, "I am sorry. I am truly sorry." I looked at him for a moment. I believed he was sorry then, but I also believed he was sorry because cameras had been rolling, because lawyers were involved, because his manager's memo had been found, because his name was now attached to something he could not quietly fix with a comped weekend. I said, "Mr. Vane, I hope you are sorry enough to change something when nobody is watching." Then we walked out. Claire held Ellie's hand. I held Mason's. Our bags rolled behind us over the tile floor, and every employee at the front desk went quiet as we passed. Outside, the air was hot and bright. For 1 second, nobody said anything. Then Ellie looked up at me and asked if we were still going to get ice cream on the way home. I laughed, a real laugh, the first one I had managed since the pool. I said, "Yes, sweetheart, we are definitely getting ice cream." We stopped at a little place off the highway. About 40 minutes later, one of those old-fashioned spots with plastic tables outside and a faded sign shaped like a cone. Mason got chocolate. Ellie got strawberry with sprinkles. Claire got coffee ice cream, even though she always claimed she did not like coffee ice cream. And I got vanilla because, after the day we had, I did not have the energy to pretend I was adventurous. We sat there in the heat, watching cars come and go, and for 10 minutes we were just a family again. Not a headline, not a video, not evidence. Just 4 people eating ice cream under a crooked umbrella. But the story did not end there. The videos spread that night, not because we posted them first, but because Patricia Bell, the woman from the Cabanas, posted a short clip with one sentence underneath it. This family deserved better. By morning, the clip had been shared thousands of times. People found the resort's page. They found the police department's page. They found old reviews from other guests who described being watched, questioned, or treated differently at Shoreline Cove. Some people supported us. Some people said Pike was just doing his job. Some people said we should have left when security asked. Some said I should have been grateful the cuffs came off. You learn a lot about people when they watch an innocent man get humiliated in front of his children and still ask what he could have done differently. Claire read a few comments, then stopped. She said, "You cannot argue with people who need the victim to be guilty. It makes them feel safer." 3 weeks later, the department released a statement saying Pike had been placed on administrative leave, while the Professional Standards Unit conducted an investigation. The statement did not mention race. It did not mention the handcuffs. It did not mention the children. It called the incident an interaction between officers, resort personnel, and guests. Claire read it twice and said, "They're trying to turn a fire into a weather report." Our attorney filed a formal civil complaint that same afternoon. The resort's legal team contacted us within 48 hours. They wanted a private meeting. They wanted to discuss resolution. They wanted confidentiality. Claire said no to the confidentiality before they had even finished the sentence. We were not interested in money if the price was silence. We wanted policy changes, independent review, mandatory reporting of security complaints, bias training designed by people who understood what bias actually looked like, and a public acknowledgement that the resort had targeted our family without cause. We also wanted the department to release the body camera footage. That became the fight. The resort agreed faster than the police department did, maybe because Russell had seen the memo, maybe because their insurers had seen it too. Trent was fired after the investigation showed he had never contacted the front desk before calling for police. Cole was terminated after investigators found messages on his phone making jokes about who did and did not belong at the resort. Russell resigned 6 weeks later. He gave a statement about taking responsibility, but he never contacted us directly again. Officer Hollis gave a full statement. He admitted that Pike had brushed off his concern about checking the reservation, and he admitted that he had been too quiet at first because he was afraid of contradicting his senior officer. I respected him for telling the truth, but I also told him something I wish more people understood. Silence is not neutral when somebody is being harmed right in front of you. He nodded like he had been carrying that thought around for a while. Pike's case took longer. It always does when the person under investigation wears a uniform. There were interviews, reviews, meetings behind closed doors, and a lot of words that sounded careful without saying much. Then, 4 months after the pool incident, the department released the findings. Pike had violated department policy by detaining me without reasonable cause, using restraints unnecessarily, and filing an incomplete initial account of the incident. He resigned 2 days before the disciplinary hearing. Some people celebrated that. Some people said resignation was enough. I did not know how to feel. Losing a job is serious. It should be. But I kept thinking about how easily he had put cuffs on me, how quickly he had looked at my family and decided we were not worth the same patience he might have offered someone else. I kept thinking about Ellie asking if I was in trouble, and I wondered how many times something like that had happened before when there were no phones, no Captain Devereaux, no federal badge in a wallet, no lawyer standing close enough to fight back. The settlement came almost a year later. Shoreline Cove agreed to fund an independent civil rights review, rewrite its security policies, require front desk verification before police could be called for guest access disputes, and contribute to a legal aid fund for families dealing with discrimination complaints. The police department agreed to release the relevant body camera footage, strengthen its reporting standards, and require supervisors to respond when officers use restraints during nonviolent property disputes. It was not perfect. Nothing about it was perfect. No policy could give my kids back the version of that vacation they thought they were going to have. No check could erase the way Mason looked at me when the cuss went on. No public statement could make Ellie forget the sound of Claire yelling my name. But change is rarely neat. Sometimes it comes from a courtroom. Sometimes it comes from a witness with a phone. Sometimes it starts when the person everybody expected to stay quiet decides they are done being convenient. The last time I saw Captain Devereux was at a public community meeting months later. She had been invited to speak about the department reforms, and I was there with Claire in the back row. Mason came too. He said he wanted to see what happened when people got caught. During the questions, a man stood up and said, "Why are we making such a big deal out of one misunderstanding?" The room got quiet. I felt Claire tense beside me, but before she could stand up, Mason did. He was 13 by then, taller than he had been that summer, still a kid, but not the same kid who'd held the melting smoothie while strangers decided whether his family belonged by a pool. He looked at the man and said, "It was not a misunderstanding to us. My dad was handcuffed in front of me. My little sister thought he was going to jail, so maybe it was one afternoon for you, but it changed how we look at people who are supposed to protect us." Nobody clapped at first. Then someone did, then another person, and soon the whole room was on its feet. I looked at my son and felt something I cannot explain without sounding like every proud father who ever lived, but I will say it anyway. I was proud of him. Not because he gave a perfect speech. He did not. His voice shook halfway through. But because he told the truth when it would have been easier to sit down and let the adults talk around it. On the drive home that night, he asked me if he had said too much. I told him, "No, you said exactly enough, and maybe that is the lesson I keep coming back to. You do not always get justice the way you imagine it. Sometimes the people who hurt you never fully understand what they took. Sometimes they apologize because they got caught, not because they changed. Sometimes the system moves slower than your anger can tolerate. But telling the truth still matters. Witnesses still matter. Refusing to let somebody rewrite what happened still matters, because the next family may not have a badge, a lawyer, a crowd, or a dozen phones pointed in the right direction. They may only have their own voice, and somebody has to make room for it. So tell me what you think. Was Officer Pike only responsible for his own choices, or did the resort create the kind of environment that made this almost inevitable? Was a resignation and a settlement enough, or should real accountability have gone further? And the hardest question of all, if nobody at that pool had recorded what happened, do you think anyone would have believed us? Leave your thoughts in the comments, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories about the moments when ordinary people decide they will not be pushed aside, not quietly, not politely, and not ever again.